Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 64 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to talk about some Dynasty breakouts, players that I think will see an increase in their value throughout the season, at the end of the season, due to their on-field play. So I have 10 players that I want to discuss across all four positions. And before we do that, I want to remind everyone, make sure you are following this podcast on your platform of choice. We're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, you name it, we're there. So go give us a follow so you don't miss any future shows. And find us on social media. We're on Twitter or X at Dynasty War Room. You can find our YouTube channel, Facebook page, and you can find me on Blue Sky as well, Andrew V. Court, same handle on Twitter or X as well. So go find us there on social media. We're happy to interact, and you'll see some show updates there as well. And one more thing before diving on into today's breakouts, I just want to tell you all about my friends at Fast Draft. It's a new fantasy best ball app. It's quick, it's a fun way to draft, and it takes some of the grind out of fantasy football. So if you're looking for some off-season drafts, some quick, fun ways to stay involved in the off-season, Fast Draft is giving away over $250,000 in prizes this year with all rookie tournaments, all flex tournaments, and even all defense tournaments. So there's something new and interesting for everyone out there. The drafts are 20 seconds per pick. You can wrap up a draft in just about 5 minutes. And if you sign up using my code WARROOM, Fast Draft will double your first deposit up to $50. So you can deposit $50, end up with $100 to use on all sorts of different and fun fantasy football drafts leading up to the 2025 season. So that's right, just use code WARROOM to double your first deposit today on Fast Draft. All right, so let's move on into our breakouts. And I have 10 players, 3 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and 2 tight ends. And let's talk some parameters here. What exactly am I talking about when I say a breakout player, breakout candidate? And number one, I'm not including any rookies because there will always be rookies that end up having great seasons, that improve on their value with a strong first year. That's not, to me, what fits into a breakout category. I think that rookies, we've spent so much time talking about them throughout the winter and spring and now into the summer, and I just don't think it fits a category of a breakout. To me, and what we're using for today's show, in addition to no rookies, it has to be that their on-field performance results in an increase in dynasty value. It's not just a situation-related increase in their value. It's due to their on-field play, and it will be their best season to date for their career for fantasy football. And that's what we're going to use to define a breakout player. So let's start with the quarterbacks. And my first player on the list is a guy that I very much believe in, and we're skirting the no rookie rule a bit because while he's not a rookie, he has not actually played a down in the NFL yet during the regular season, and that's going to be Minnesota Vikings quarterback J.J. McCarthy. So he is being valued right now as the QB 14 on Keep Trade Cut, and he's entering year 2. He got to watch and learn for an entire rookie season while he was out injured, and he's back. He's healthy now. He's getting ready to go for the season. He's got elite weapons, a great system under Kevin O'Connell. You know, anytime that you see an improvement with someone like Sam Darnold last year, where he goes from, backup, journeyman, bounced around, failed former first-round pick to career season, he lands another starting job elsewhere with a big contract. I think you absolutely need to pay attention to that. Justin Jefferson, of course, helps any quarterback. Jordan Addison is a very capable number 2. TJ Hawkinson is a top 10 tight end. So it's a very good system to be a part of. It's a solid offensive line, good running game with Aaron Jones and the addition of Jordan Mason. And it's a division that will be very competitive, probably a lot of high-scoring games, given the offense that Detroit has, Chicago, Green Bay. So you're going to get a lot of high-scoring, good matchups. And I think J.J. McCarthy can improve on his QB 14 value that he has right now because he is someone that can run the ball. This is not someone that's going to be a run-first quarterback, but I think he is going to give you a rushing baseline. I think he can make all the throws. I think he's a very smart player, handles pressure well, really excels in those third down situations, pressure moments. We saw him in college at Michigan where he didn't necessarily put up huge numbers from a stat perspective, but when the game was on the line, you needed a big play. He was a great quarterback to have in those situations. We saw it against Ohio State in the national title game, against Alabama. So I feel very good about the system and the fit for J.J. McCarthy now, having had a full season to learn the playbook, get acclimated to what being in the NFL is like, and now we just need him to stay healthy, get on the field. And there may be a few growing pains early on, of course, as there always will be for new quarterbacks, but I would expect him to end up being a high-end QB2, I think, as a rookie, even sneak in as a back-end QB1. So I'm thinking somewhere in the QB 10 to 15 range would make a lot of sense for his rookie season, which I think would boost him forward, give him a boost in value with that type of performance, as we would probably expect him to get better in year 3. So I think the expectations are and should be high for J.J. McCarthy, and I think he will live up to the hype and be a very good quarterback for the Vikings. Now, another player from the same draft class that I think has a very promising future and is on my breakout list is Michael Penix Jr., who is QB 19 on Keep Trade Cut. Atlanta Falcons quarterback, first-round pick last year, top 10 surprise pick, and he played and took over the starting job at the end of the season last year for Atlanta, replacing Kirk Cousins, and he showed a lot of promise. He had some really nice games. He was making the throws. He has a strong arm, and he's got some good weapons there. We saw Drake London have a huge game with Michael Penix Jr. at the end of the season. There's still Kyle Pitts, who may or may not be a great tight end. I think, at least as of now, we can say he's a solid option to have as a second or third receiver to go to in the offense. Darnell Mooney, I think, is a very capable, solid number 2 wideout. So some good offensive players there. And of course, Bijan Robinson to help in the run game. So Michael Penix Jr. is not someone that is going to give you a ton of rushing yards. I think he can move around a bit. And he was probably more of a rushing quarterback early on in his college career before he suffered all those injuries. But he does have a very considerable injury history, including multiple ACL injuries and whatnot. So I don't think he's going to ever really be a quarterback that looks to run, but he can escape the pocket a little bit, avoid sacks, and I think he certainly is a quarterback that, like J.J. McCarthy, can end up in that 10 to 15 range for fantasy. I don't think he ever really will be a top 10 fantasy quarterback, though. So while Penix certainly could be someone that falls into place there at the high-end QB2, I don't think he has the ceiling that McCarthy does. I think J.J. McCarthy is somebody that we could see turn into a top 7 fantasy quarterback in terms of dynasty value at some point. And I don't see that in the cards for Michael Penix Jr., which is why I think the current values at 14 and 19 for those two players makes a lot of sense, because I think it factors that in. But Michael Penix Jr. can be a very capable QB2 in a Superflex league, and someone that just gives you solid, stable production and be the long-term answer. He might even be a better real-life quarterback than a fantasy quarterback, but that, of course, still gives you some longevity and some safety in his value, which is always really nice to have at the quarterback position. The third player on this list at QB is going to be Bryce Young. Carolina Panthers quarterback, currently valued as the QB 20 on Keep Trade Cut, and this one is a bit riskier. I do not feel as strongly about Bryce Young as I do McCarthy and Penix Jr. I think there is certainly more of a risk that he ends up a bust compared to the other two, and so it's a bit of a tough pick, because I went back and forth. I was like, should I include him on this list? Should I not? Because I'm a little bit hesitant about it, but I want to put him on this list because the conditions are very right for a breakout for Bryce Young. So I want you to think of this like a tornado warning versus a tornado watch, thunderstorm warning, thunderstorm watch. When you get that severe weather, and J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix Jr. to me are the warning. It's coming. The conditions are there, and we see it happening. Full steam ahead. You better take cover. Bryce Young, it's, I think, more of a watch. The conditions are right. It's trending in that direction, but it hasn't quite happened yet. And I'm not, we're not fully there yet. You don't have to, it's not quite there the same way as how your reaction might be to a warning. So obviously a bit of a unique example given that, severe weather warnings versus watches are more on the negative side. But hey, I guess it depends on your perspective. Sometimes those can be fun as long as you don't lose power. But I just think that's a good illustration of where I'm at on the scale, because everything is there for Bryce Young to succeed and be successful. He just has a new top 10 wide receiver on his team, and Ted McMillan. He's got a second year now in Coach David Canales' system. And he showed a lot of growth at the end of 2024. He got benched after a rough start to the season. He was brutal the year before. In fact, he was a player that I was essentially fully out on probably this time last year. I just didn't like his rookie year. Was not really a believer. And while I acknowledged that, the coach coming in, having done a lot of good things for Baker Mayfield and quarterbacks in the past, that it was possible that this could happen for Bryce Young. And I think we have seen the start of that. So he did enough to hold onto the job, obviously. He's going to be the starter. Getting benched, I think, ended up being a very good thing for Bryce Young. He got to take a step back, some pressure maybe taken off of his shoulders, and watched and learned from Andy Dalton before retaking that job. And he had some really nice fantasy performances at the end of the year. And Bryce Young is someone that is not really considered a scrambler or a runner. And I think that is something that can limit his upside as someone that also is maybe more ticketed to be a QB2 in Superflex for most of his career, because I just don't think he has that high-end rushing upside. But Bryce Young ran the ball a lot at the end of last year. In fact, it was one of, if not the reason that he was so good for fantasy football. Not only was his passing numbers, did those take a step up, and did he look like a true NFL quarterback, but he also was running the ball enough that he was putting up a lot of points for fantasy. So if he can continue to do that, that's, in my notes for the show today, I have in all caps, keep scrambling. Because if he can continue to run and just add, 40 to 50 yards on the ground every game, that would be a pretty big departure from what I think we expect from him. It certainly wasn't what we saw in the past or in college. He's never been known as a scrambler. He's always been an accurate pass-first quarterback. But if he can add that rushing ability and do that on a week-to-week basis, that's going to really help his floor in fantasy and give him a much better chance to succeed, both to keep the job, but also to remain a relevant fantasy quarterback. So if he can continue that growth, he gets another year in the system. He's got some better receivers now with McMillan. Hopefully we can see a second-year leap from Xavier Legette, who they took last year in the draft. So there's still Adam Thielen hanging around. The running game with Chuba Hubbard was solid last year. They added Rico Dowdle, improved on the O-line. So I think there's some positive feelings around the offense right now. So that's why he makes this list as the third quarterback as a breakout player for 2025. All right, so let's move on over to running back. And I have two names here. And this position was a bit tougher because when you factor in that I was not going to be choosing rookies for this, it makes things a lot tougher because there's a lot of good rookies coming out from this draft class that are going to have big roles. Some of them are going to be immediate starters. So, sure, you could obviously look at the Ashton Genties, the Marion Hamptons, Caleb Johnson, Harvey. There's a bunch of names from the draft that could fit the role as a breakout that will improve on their value. You can even go down in the second, third round Tootin and Scattaboo and guys like that. But for the purposes of this episode, where I'm talking non-rookies that can truly break out, there's only a couple names I think that really came to mind for me, and so that's why I have these two guys on the list. And a lot of this is because I think the running back market is pretty well established right now. I don't think there's a ton of room for a lower valued player to take a huge jump. I just don't think it's set up that way right now, because all the players that are young and exciting are being valued pretty well already, or they've already taken starting jobs and broken out. And that's just kind of how we see things at the position. It's either you come in as a rookie and you take the job, or you kind of fall off, or you're stuck in a committee, things like that. So the two names here are guys that I think can take a nice solid jump this fall. And number one is going to be Jordan Mason, running back, 41 on Keep Trade Cut, was traded from the 49ers to the Minnesota Vikings in the offseason. And to me, that was interesting because it showed that Minnesota liked Jordan Mason better than their options in this draft, even though there are a lot of good running backs coming out. And so they made that decision that, hey, this is the guy we've identified. He had a really nice year in San Francisco while CMC was hurt. And he's only 26 years old, and he pairs really well with Aaron Jones. So Aaron Jones is going to be the pass-catching running back. He still can do a lot of good things, even though he's now 30 years old. But they brought him back, and it could be a very nice 1-2 punch between these two guys. And I would expect Jordan Mason to be more of the early down grinder, the goal line back, and do that sort of job for the Vikings. But I think given that this offense should be one of the better offenses in the league, I think that will be a pretty solid role that will certainly return some better value than RB41. And I think he could certainly be somebody that is right on that RB2, RB3 border somewhere, 22 to 26 or so, I think would make a lot of sense for him. So I think that's a pretty big jump from where he's currently being valued. And that's not even factoring in the contingent upside that he has should Aaron Jones get hurt. Because if Jordan Mason becomes a full-time starter and is handling the passing work, and on top of that is still getting the goal line and early down carries, he could be an RB1. I mean, he could be just like he was last year in San Francisco. He was awesome. He was a must-start player when he was leading that backfield. And I think he has that potential upside if Aaron Jones, who's 30 years old, misses any time. So not to mention the fact that Aaron Jones has never really been someone that makes it through an entire season anyways. So that's where I'm excited about the possibilities for Jordan Mason, and he is the first running back on this list. Now, the second running back is Roschon Johnson, Chicago Bears running back. He's RB61 on Keep Trade Cut, which is pretty far down the board. So this is not someone that is really costing you much of anything to acquire. You can probably get him for a 4th-round pick. And Roschon Johnson, still pretty young. He now is in a new system with Ben Johnson, and it's a system that is known for an elite running game. Detroit obviously has had multiple running backs be very successful in fantasy over the past few seasons, even before Jahmyr Gibbs was drafted. So we've seen Jamal Williams and even DeAndre Swift in that system was solid. So I don't know how Ben Johnson views DeAndre Swift. He didn't go out and draft a high-end rookie in the draft. He took somebody in the 7th round, Kyle Monangai from Rutgers. And there have been talks about Nick Chubb, but so far no signing. And so to me, this leaves a window of opportunity for Roschon Johnson if the Bears do not add a veteran before the season begins. So certainly Nick Chubb would come in and take over a sizable chunk of the committee, and that would probably ruin any chance that Johnson has of being fantasy relevant. But as it stands right now, that hasn't happened, and someone else is going to have to get carries in this offense besides DeAndre Swift, and I think it's going to be Johnson. And if that is the case, he will certainly return value on his RB61 value that he has right now. So, and who knows? I mean, DeAndre Swift, again, we talk about contingent upside, and that's kind of one of these nice things about clear-cut handcuff running backs, is if something happens to the starter, you have, a pretty big advantage there, considering that player had already been on the field for a time. And we see this with other more high-profile backup running backs like Zach Charbonnet, and then, we mentioned Jordan Mason last year, et cetera. But I like the possibility that Roschon Johnson can do something for you, and he's essentially free. He's an add-on in trades. He's not somebody that you even really have to go target on his own. You can just, go for another trade and have him just thrown on at the end as a kind of a sweetener, nothing in the deal. So Roschon Johnson makes this list from the Bears as a breakout candidate for 2025. All right, so wide receivers, I have 3 names, and wide receiver is interesting because as I was looking through the list of all the players, I was really thinking like, wow, there's not a ton of obvious names to break out. Maybe one of them who's going to be the first name I mention here, but the rankings are, there's just not a lot of guys here that really fit the bill because we've seen a lot more rookies break out right away, and typically the second year for wide receivers is where we see a lot of those big breakouts happen. It used to be the third year, now it's kind of shifted into the second year, but now we're seeing a lot of rookies. So finding those players that are young enough to take a significant jump in their value and be a good, consistent producer for fantasy, it's a little bit more difficult at this position than I initially thought when I started, working on the show. And so my first player is going to be Marvin Harrison Jr., Arizona Cardinals, second-year wide receiver. He's valued right now as the wide receiver 11 on Keep Trade Cut. So he's already being valued very highly, but that is a bit of a drop from where he was as a rookie. And that's because everyone loved him as a prospect, was, pretty much the consensus 102 in most Superflex leagues, and was an elite prospect. Obviously has the family, the bloodlines there helping him out, with his dad being an elite NFL wide receiver. And I think the issue with Marvin Harrison Jr. right now is that we view his rookie season as worse than it actually was because our expectations were so high. We expected Marvin Harrison to do what Malik Nabers did, to do what Brian Thomas did, to be one of those top 10 wide receivers right away in his rookie season, and it just didn't happen that way. But he still had a pretty solid year. He had 885 yards, 8 touchdowns, and I think the bigger issue for Marvin Harrison is that he seems more like the number 2 option in the offense behind Trey McBride, who just got paid and is a very, very good tight end. But Marvin Harrison still is the number 1 receiver on the team at the wide receiver position, and he has a very high ceiling. He's still a very good prospect, and even though his rookie season was not incredible, I still think it was good enough that we should be expecting a breakout in year 2. And while he might not be the top 3 dynasty wide receiver that we thought he could be, he still can very easily jump into the top 10, even the top 5. But somewhere in that 5 to 10 range, I think, is probably where he will settle into if he has the breakout season that I'm expecting. And I think we should absolutely see him top, 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns and have more of that true breakout year that we were hoping for last year. Next up is going to be Rashee Rice, wide receiver from the Kansas City Chiefs. He's wide receiver 18 on the year, or wide receiver 18 on Keep Trade Cut in terms of his current dynasty value. And he had a mini breakout last year. This was a player that, was a second-round pick, small school, and then he just came out and was awesome at the beginning of last year, was on pace to be a top 5 wide receiver in the league, and was great. But then he got hurt, and he missed the rest of the season. Pretty rough injury. And so now there's some questions because, there's Xavier Worthy, who came on later in the year as a rookie. Hollywood Brown is back, and there's still Travis Kelce. So it's a bit of an interesting situation for Rashee Rice because it's not as clean as you maybe would like. But I do think that Rice is going to be the wide receiver 1 on the Chiefs. I think he's going to pick up where he left off. He might not finish as the top 5 overall wide receiver, but I certainly think he can and should finish as a top 12 wide receiver overall and be a wide receiver 1 for fantasy football. I don't think you have to worry about a suspension. I just don't think that it's going to be an issue until 2026 from what it sounds like in his legal case and the situation there from off the field. So I like the situation for him. I think that he is a good candidate to make a jump up into the next tier for next season because I do think he's going to be the wide receiver 1 in this team. He's a possession receiver. He gets open. He showed that he has a good connection with Patrick Mahomes. And I think as Travis Kelce gets up there in age, this offense is going to shift as it kind of already started to do into being a little bit more focused on the wide receivers again. And I think that this will be a really nice 1-2 punch between Rice and Worthy moving into 2025. So Rashee Rice, the number 2 breakout receiver on this list. All right, so now we're going to take a jump way down the board. So kind of like what we did with the running backs where we went a little bit down on the list of players to find some guys that I think are breakout players for 2025. And I'm going to do that here with Marvin Mims. So Denver Broncos wide receiver 61 on Keep Trade Cut. So pretty big dip from where we were with the prior 2 players. But he's a former second-round pick. He's still very young. He's only 23 years old. And he finally got on the field enough to have some big games at the end of last season. So he had a really nice connection there with Bo Nix, had some huge games, and he finally broke that 50% snaps on the field. He finally was getting some more playing time, which was really the big issue for him. He just simply wasn't getting on the field, even though every time he got on the field, he would make a play. He just, you can't be a fantasy contributor when you're only playing 20% of snaps. You got to be at least, at the 50% mark, if not more. And so now that he finally hit those numbers, we saw him crack that in the playoffs as well. Not necessarily a big playoff performance, but the playing time is what we're really looking at here. And Denver did draft Pat Bryant in the 3rd round, a big wide receiver that could potentially get on the field a bit right away. There's still Troy Franklin. Vele is there. So it's kind of a mixed bag at the position, but I think it's a wide open competition. And Mims has speed. He's a big play guy. He's very efficient. And he's someone that even if he settles into more of a 50 to 60% of snaps type of guy, I think given the cost, he could very well be Jaden Reed, but for way, way cheaper of an acquisition cost. I don't know that he's ever really going to be a 90% plus snap guy. I just don't know that he is an every down player. At least that's not really what Sean Payton seems to view him as. But if he can get on the field enough to be relevant, he's going to be great because he's a really efficient player. He has lots of speed, just has a big play ability that you are really looking for someone like him. So Marvin Mims, I think, is a nice little buy low option that could turn out to be a nice player that you can start, as a flex player, certainly on bye weeks, that sort of thing. And, given what we've seen, everyone knows if you listen to one of the prior episodes, I'm not a huge Jaden Reed fan, but I think part of that is because of the cost. He's being, valued as a player that's worth a whole lot more than someone like Marvin Mims. And so I would much rather buy in at the low price and hope that they turn into something like Reed than buy into Reed right now, hoping that he then turns into a full-time player, just because I just don't think that's in the cards. So, but Marvin Mims makes this list. I think he's the early leader in the clubhouse to be the number 2 wide receiver on the team in 2025 behind Courtland Sutton. I think he showed enough that he certainly can get that done. All right, so let's move on to the tight ends, and I have two final players here that I want to talk about. And again, we're going to dive down the board a bit because I'm trying to give you players that are guys that you can actually acquire. I know some of the receivers and even some of the quarterbacks are some bigger names that you're not necessarily going to get easily, but I don't want to be giving you names that are already, in the top 10 and because it's hard, number one, to break out from that level of player into the next tier, but also it's very difficult to acquire those players. I think for the most part, a lot of the names here on this list are guys that you can get in a trade, and I think that certainly is the case here for these two tight ends. And so first on the list is going to be Ja'Tavion Sanders, tight end number 27 on Keep Trade Cut, plays for the Carolina Panthers, and he had his rookie year for Carolina last year as a fourth-round pick and was solid. Not someone that you could really start, but he is the best receiving tight end on the Panthers roster. He split time with Tommy Tremble, who is the better blocker at the position, and so and that's still the case. Tremble is still a better blocker, and that's going to limit Sanders' role for now. However, Tommy Tremble just had some surgery here in the offseason. He is supposed to be back for training camp, or will be rehabbing through training camp. It's not entirely clear, but I think the expectation is that he'll be ready to go for week 1. But generally speaking, guys that are not fully ready to go and are battling injuries in the offseason, it takes some time to really get going. And I think that provides Sanders with a really big opportunity to take over the starting job and be kind of the clear number one and on the field all the time. Now, could that not happen? Of course. I mean, this is, again, we're talking tight end 27, pretty far down the board. But he had a nice career at Texas, was a good receiving target there. And Bryce Young, if he can take the next step, it kind of goes hand in hand that, at least one of these receivers, probably Sanders at tight end, will end up taking a nice jump forward as well. So I think given, again, the conditions are right, second year in the offense, some improvements made all around, I think that the situation is ripe for Ja'Tavion Sanders to take a big step forward this fall. All right, now the final player on today's list, tight end 29 on Keep Trade Cut, and that's Theo Johnson, tight end for the New York Giants. And this is an interesting player, and I'm almost surprised that he is below Sanders right now, because Theo Johnson was the clear-cut starting tight end from day one for the Giants as a rookie last year. I mean, he came in despite not necessarily having like a special college career, and boom, was just starter right away until he got hurt later in the season. But this is a situation in New York where there's not really a clear second option in the passing game. I mean, it's probably Wan'Dale Robinson, but I don't really know that he is a big downfield threat. He's one of more of those like PPR short passing game type of players, whereas Malik Neighbors is obviously the number one and is going to be the go-to player. But there's room in this offense for a second or third option where I think Theo Johnson could fit in. He was an elite athlete, tested very well at the combine. He gets, again, second year in the system. I think having a second year in the same system, especially after a rookie year, just your sophomore season in the NFL in general, I think provides a lot of, it's a really good place to be. A lot of people break out in that second season. And so I think given the quarterback upgrade, we got Russell Wilson and, Jackson Dart waiting in the wings, and worst come to worst, could see some Jameis Winston as well, who is always good for these receivers and, pass catchers in offenses, even if he's not necessarily going to help the team in real life. But anyhow, I think that things are looking bright for Theo Johnson. I think he will be this team's full-time starting tight end again, presuming he stays healthy. And, he's going to have the opportunity to secure that role in what could be a pretty exciting offense if things work out, especially at the quarterback position with Russell Wilson and then Jackson Dart. So there you have it. There are my 10 players that I think will break out this year. Quarterback with J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix Jr., and Bryce Young. At running back, Jordan Mason, Roschon Johnson, and at wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr., Rashee Rice, and Marvin Mims. And then at tight end, Jatavian Sanders and Theo Johnson. So there you have it. Thank you all very much for tuning in. I'll remind you again, download Fast Draft, use code WARROOM, and you'll get you'll get a matched on your deposit up to $50 using code WARROOM. So go check that out, and don't forget that promo code WARROOM. And we'll talk to you all next week. I appreciate you all for tuning in. My name is Andrew Valancourt, and you have been listening to the Dynasty War Room podcast.